All right, I think everyone should put their headsets on and let me know by bobbing your head up and down when you've got your headsets on. Yeah, feels good? Silent disco's in effect? All right, hi everybody. I'm Jeff Rain. I'm the head of platform partnerships at Foursquare, and I'll be joined in a few minutes by Marissa Chaco, who's our director of product development. And we're here to tell you a little bit more about location intelligence, Foursquare style, and really to talk about how you can build location intelligence into your mobile applications and your overall applications, and to harness the power of location for your messaging as well. How do you connect those two things? And we're going to be talking a little bit about our core products at Foursquare, and then how we've built Marsbot, which is our location-aware bot, and Marissa will walk you through that vision. So we like to start things off by being provocative. So I'm going to ask you a question, which is, who are you? It's a tough one, right? Who are you? There's lots of ways that as digital marketers and as app builders and as just marketers in general in the world, we try to figure out who someone is. You might have an Instagram account filled with gorgeous pictures of Hawaii, filled with beautiful models. You might have a Pinterest account with boards and boards filled with that kitchen remodel for that house you don't own yet. Is that who you are? Are you that person? Or is that who you aspire to be in some senses? So there's no simple answer to that question, because in some ways you are that person, and in some ways you're not, because we would ask, who are you really? You know, there's an aspiration to who you are, but there's also the reality. And when we talk about this reality, we're going to talk about where you go in the real world. Because where you go in the real world, we think, is one of the best indicators of who you are. You went there, and then you went there, and then you went to this one, and then you went to that one. But what do these pins mean? And this is the essence of Foursquare. And so I give you this as a little bit of a preamble to better set the stage for what we're going to do next, which is to talk about how location intelligence can inform your applications and make them richer, help you re-engage your audience, and do more with location. Because right now, I still don't know who you are. I see 4 pins on a map that maybe someone has gone to. But where have you been? Was it a donut shop? Was it the airport? Was it too many builds. I blew it. I had a whole thing there. So the donut shop is one place. The airport is another place. The craft brewery is a third place. Knowing specifically where you go is critical. And it's going to be critical when you build your apps, when you try to understand your users, who we like to refer to by their real name, people. They're not users. They're not Mao, they're not Dao, they're people. They live in the real world. They go to school, they eat donuts, they go to the airport, sometimes for work, sometimes for pleasure. They're people. And so we want to help you understand your people better so that you can serve your people better. It's also really important to realize that accuracy matters here, especially in urban environments. Location is hard. We've been doing location at Foursquare for 9 years. And in an urban environment, sometimes 2 locations can be right next to each other. A donut shop could be next to a Montessori preschool, like in my neighborhood in Glen Park. There's a bakery right next to a preschool. I go to that preschool to drop my kid off 3 times a week on average. I'm not going to the bakery 3 times a week, maybe once a week. But still, that's a big difference. Who am I based on where I go? It's a critical insight. So that's what we believe. We believe who you are is where you go. It's the best indicator of you as a person. And so as an app developer, harnessing that ability both at the time and place, in real time, but then in aggregate, understanding the profiles of people is what we're going to talk about. The question really is, if where I go is who I am, how does anyone measure that? How can we do that? We can't all follow all of our people who are using all of our apps all the time. And of course, you all know the answer to this. It's this thing. This is going to be the answer. But specifically, what's the answer? How do we do it? This is the key. This thing is never more than 18 inches away from you. Half of you are holding yours. You're taking a picture, you're taking a note, you're writing an email because you couldn't get really away from the office today. I know, I feel your pain. But it's always with you. And this is the key that's going to unlock this idea of who you are. And we like to think that we're the ones holding it. There's lots of players in this field. We've been doing it the longest. We have some of the most advanced tools and technologies in this space, and it all comes from our consumer apps. A lot of you probably know Foursquare as the check-in app. You were there in South by in 2009. You checked in and your friend checked in and oh my God, you were next door and then you got together and you had that beer and it was awesome. And you are the original explorers who we built Foursquare for. Since that time, we've evolved Foursquare. We now have 3 apps. 2 of them are on the screen, and the third will be referenced by Marissa in a few minutes. Our Foursquare City Guide helps you explore the world, helps you find that perfect burrito, helps you find that bar that's still open even though it's 2:30 in the morning and you're in San Francisco, helps you find that park that you need right now for that moment of zen, helps you explore Helsinki where you've never been before. And Swarm is our life logging, our gamified life logging app that helps you really track your world. Where were you in Venice last year? If I could only remember the name of that place that had that amazing red wine. And it's for our life loggers, it's for our serendipitous moments, it's for sharing your location. And these tools that we have out in the world provide the data back to Foursquare as a company to fill our place database. We have 93 million places in the world. We understand those places like no one else does. We understand that the ferry building is right there because we've had 11 billion check-ins throughout the world. So we know where the ferry building is. We know what's inside the ferry building because our users have told us so that they can get the most out of Foursquare City Guide. We know where Slanted Door is inside the ferry building, and if you have a chance, it's delicious. Seriously, it's not played out, it's still great. And we know you're there, and we see the world this way. We have learned to see the world through the signals that the phone delivers to us. So I'll just play that again, just to drive home a point, which is that the phones see the world in a certain way. They see the signals around them. They see the Wi-Fi scans. They see the towers. They see the GPS, the barometer, the accelerometer. That's what we're reading as Foursquare. And just like a bat sees the world in a certain way, I'm looking for the people who have seen that National Geographic thing at 3 in the morning, how the bats see a world, how a dolphin sees a world through echolocation. That's how your phones see it. They see it the way they see it. People see it differently. People recognize that a Starbucks logo means what a Starbucks logo means. It means latte. It means green. It means basic. It means pumpkin spice. It means good Wi-Fi. So your phone sees it one way. Person sees it another way. Foursquare's job is to combine it. Foursquare's job is to put those 2 things together so that at the end of the day, the 4 pins that were blank pins on this map become Joe's coffee shop, become a dry cleaner, become that tech startup that will be huge, and become that dive bar. It becomes those 4 places, and now I think you know a little bit more about this person. Now you can learn a little bit more. Now you can know when to engage. Should I send a push notification when they're at the dry cleaner? Maybe not, but maybe that's exactly the right time. They just left work. And now they're at a bar. Is now the right time to interrupt them with something? Maybe, maybe not. It's experiment and find out. So we've been doing this ourselves for 9 years, and we've been doing it for third parties about as long. The API is almost as old as the company itself. In fact, I think Dennis would argue it is as old as the company itself. So today we have 140,000 developers accessing us via our Foursquare API. Developer.foursquare.com, head on over, it's delightful. And they're accessing our place database, 93 million places, hundreds of millions of photos all over the world, hundreds of millions of tips, ratings. You can really learn a lot about places from this database, and you can access it in real time via the API. And now, it's not just developers, or we say developers, but what we mean is tech-forward companies. Apple relies on our locations for Apple Maps. Airbnb relies on us for photos and data around venues. Snapchat powers geofilters based on our understanding of the world. Those place shapes you just saw, they help define a space, and you can access a given geofilter in that space. Twitter, I encourage everyone to tweet a lot, and you can tweet from here. You hit that little blue pin, and you can choose Peer 27, or you can choose to tweet from Signal 2017. Because someone from Twilio was smart enough that they built a custom event or a custom venue, and they put it here. And so it's a perfect example of what we do. The crowd, the community gave us a location called Signal 2017, and now you can use it in Twitter through Foursquare. It's a great example of what we do and how we do it. And we have a new innovation that we're launching, and that's really the segue to the next bit of the conversation, which is our Pilgrim SDK. We launched this about 6 months ago. It brought it out of alpha, so to speak. And this is our persistent background place awareness technology. This works from the background. Our users in Foursquare and Swarm use this religiously. You opt into background location sharing, and now we know where you go in the real world in real time. So it's a stop detection model. It helps understand when the user has truly stopped. Not to tie your shoes, not to stop at a red light, but a real solid stop detection model when you're visiting a place. So I'm visiting that, but where is it? Well, you call our API, we call our own API, find out where in the world you are, brings down the place database. We have a home and work detection model. So you'll know within 3 days when your users, your people, are at home or at work. And you can use that information to customize how you interact with them. We have a dashboard. Most importantly are these last two, I think. We've killed the geofence. If anyone today is working in geo, they're probably drawing geofences around lat longs. They're dropping pins and maps and drawing big dumb circles around them. Or they've got a team of people somewhere drawing lines around a parking lot and around a building to capture location. We've eliminated that because of that place shape that you saw visualized for the ferry building and for the restaurant that I'm forgetting the name of at this moment. Thank you, you're paying attention. So we've killed the geofence here. This works out of the box, and it works for all 93 million locations. And the last bit is this secondary piece. It's not geo, but it wouldn't work unless this last bit was there, which is battery optimization. If you make a mobile app, you have to care about battery optimization. If you draw too much battery, you will be done. And they won't just turn off the feature, they'll just kill the app. People are not patient. They see something hogging their resources, they kick you out of the house. So we went to market with this about 6 months ago, and that's why we're here. We think there's a lot to be done with the developers in this room building on the tools that Twilio makes available, and we're excited to do so. At the moment, we're working with a whole number of partners. My transition failed. We're working with a whole number of partners, Capital One, Snip Snap, Raise, Wallaby, retail, TouchTunes. You can see us at work in these applications today. Just head to your local application store and download one of these, granted background permissions, and watch how that app uses your background. Again, this is a white labeled feature. There's no Foursquare branding. User doesn't have to be a Foursquare user. There's no OAuth here. We have other solutions for that. This is a white labeled SDK that's running today in these among other apps. And it's also running in this very adorable app represented down here by this character we call Mars. And that allows me to introduce my esteemed colleague, Marissa Chaco, who's going to talk to you about how we use Pilgrim SDK and Twilio together to make Marsbot a very delightful character.
Thanks, Jeff. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay, awesome. So hey, I'm Marissa Chaco. I'm the head of the consumer product team at Foursquare. So I basically build mobile apps, and something we built about a year ago, actually. Marsbot had its 1 year anniversary yesterday, I saw on Time Hot. Yeah, Mars is one. It was a bot, and so, it started back in 2015, and basically we were all kind of looking at the landscape of bots. Everyone's talking about bots right now, and we're like, how can we build a bot for Foursquare? Like, what would that look like? And, we looked at the landscape, and there's a lot of really dumb bots out there. You're like, what's the weather? They're like, the weather is this. What's, where can I get pizza? You can get pizza here. It wasn't like that exciting. It wasn't that much more than what you might get out of a modern app. And in a lot of cases, it was kind of worse. And so we were trying to think, like, okay, what could we do that would really push it forward? And we really started brainstorming around, could we make it more contextually relevant? Could we make it feel more personal, like somebody that actually knew you, like a friend that you're talking to? And ultimately, we kind of wanted it to be more like the sister in the movie Her, Where it's like that friend, and maybe without the sexy ScarJo voice, but somebody who's kind of like whispering in your ear, always looking out for you, and thinking about your preferences, and it feels much more human. It doesn't feel kind of like a robot talking to you or a machine. So we chose to go with SMS as well, partially because we want 100% read rates, but also because we want it to be a conversation, a dialogue. We didn't want just kind of a one-way push notification. And so that was kind of the grounding that we started out with when we built Marsbot. So if you put it all together, we think about Marsbot kind of as three main pieces. The first is contextual awareness, and that really comes from the Pilgrim SDK that Jeff was just talking about. The second is personalization, like how do you build like a rich user profile around the signals you gather. And we gather those from the Pilgrim SDK, but also from users' input directly. And then finally, there's kind of the friendly conversational aspect, which we power through Twilio's SMS API. So Pilgrim gives us a lot of useful information. We do kind of two types of messages that I'm going to talk about. The first is triggering in-the-moment messages based on the user's current context. I actually think your slide deck may be slightly out of date. Yeah. I'll just roll with it. It's cool. Yeah, because I had a flow chart after this, but that's cool. So the first is like these real-time trigger-based messages. So, for example, if you walk into Pagan Idol, there would be Marsbot could send you a ping that said like, hey, you should probably get the Mai Tai here. And so the way we do that is basically using the Pilgrim SDK. And so I'm going to try and visualize the flowchart. It basically starts out with, you walk with your phone into Pagan Idol. Pilgrim will detect that stop, and it'll basically send that information to Foursquare's servers, and Foursquare's servers will translate or kind of reverse geocode that into, this is the venue, this is the confidence we have that that person's at the venue, this is some information about the venue itself, and then we send that to the Marsbot server, and Marsbot server is basically going to do two things. One, we're going to apply kind of a custom logic, and that's going to tell us, should we take action on this stop? Like, is this something Marsbot wants to comment to you about? So the things that we look at are like, what is the category of the place? If you're at that dry cleaner, maybe Marsbot doesn't have much to tell you, but if you're at Pagan Idol, like, it might have something. We also will look at, have you been there before? Because if you have, maybe we don't want to recommend something again. And so we'll kind of apply some filtering logic to sort of decide what stops to take action on. And assuming we kind of pass through those filters, then that's when we say, okay, let's generate that notification. We send that on to Twilio's servers where the SMS is generated, and then that gets pushed to the phone, which appears for the user. So that's sort of how these kind of real-time messages work. And that's one type of message that Marsbot sends that's pretty cool. The second are these scheduled messages, and these are based on a user profile that we build up that uses a lot of the signals from the Pilgrim SDK. And we calculate all these recommendations offline and then decide when to send them based on a user's profile, basically. So how does Marsbot do this? So first, the foundation of a user's profile is basically gathering these signals. So from a neighborhood context, we'll look at, what neighborhoods do users spend a lot of time in? Like, do they hang out a lot in Soma? Do they live in the Mission? Maybe they go to East Bay a lot. Those are places that we look at because they're more likely to be ones that the users want recommendations for. So that's something that we'll look at. We also look at categories that users frequent. If somebody goes to Italian a lot or Mexican a lot, we'll kind of keep track of that as something that could be of interest that we would want to notify them about. We look at timing and frequency. So for this, it could be, do you go out to bars once a month, twice a week? What days do you tend to go out on? Because I think trying to personalize the experience also means understanding, do they need like 10 bar recommendations a month, or do they need one, or maybe zero, because they never go to bars. So we're kind of building up this profile of a user to decide what's the right type of information. And then finally, it's the history. So where have they been as far as we know? So if we know they've been to Pagan Idol, if we know they've already been to places, it's kind of keeping track of those places so you can not recommend them again so you don't look dumb, but also, try and always be bringing something fresh to the table for your users. So if we put this all together, let's say we have the neighborhood and category preferences, and I kind of did this based on me. This was the Babuji one was a message that Marsbot sent me, so I'm just using that. So neighborhood and category preferences, I live in the Mission. I work in Soma. I love Indian and Mexican food. So this could be like what my profile might look like in a very simplified form, right? From there, we'll look for relevant venues in our places database, and we'll basically say like which places kind of match that criteria. So we'll come up with a whole list that maybe includes El Metate, La Taqueria, Babuji, and we'll say like, okay, this is like a possible set of venues we could send to the user. Then we're going to filter out anything that we've recommended before or places that I visited. So if I've been to La Taqueria, we shouldn't recommend that again, so we'll cross that out. And then basically we'll rank and schedule that delivery. So we'll look at, for ranking, we do a variety of signals, but we'll look at the venue's rating, like is this a 9.0 or a 6.0? We'll look at if it's new and hot, so was it just open in the last month? And those tend to be more interesting, exciting to users. So we kind of apply our own kind of ranking algorithm to it to then decide like, okay, out of these two, we would probably send Babuji because that's the most interesting. And so when we put it all together, that's sort of how we come up with, I also flubbed the transitions, sorry. So when we put it all together, that's kind of how we come up with a ping like this. So there's actually a lot of information that we're gathering that goes into this. So it seems really simple when you see it, but it's a culmination of a lot of things to get that right, because SMS is a very invasive channel, right, for your users. It's very personal, and so you have to be sending really good messages, otherwise they're going to stop. And so I think the bar is very high compared to push, where you can kind of send a lot of things and get away with it because it's like, it's push, So the same way email, you can send a lot of things, but users are kind of tolerant. But on SMS, they're really not very tolerant because they want it to be very relevant to them. So I think sending a message that's super personalized and using those signals you can gather based on the user's location, kind of back to what Jeff said, it's the best representation of who they are as far as we can tell. So this is like one example of how you could potentially use the Pilgrim SDK. I bet there's like a million other ways. I obviously work at Foursquare, and so we do everything about like exploring the world and food and drink and those types of recommendations. So that's why we built Marsbot around that. But I could see you extending it to a lot of different use cases. To just kind of wrap up in terms of some like pro tips or things we discovered the hard way. So first is using category blacklist to avoid awkward moments. So, at first we were like, okay, we'll let Marsbot ask you about anything. So we would say, oh, well, you've been to 3 hotels. Like, let's look for hotels near your home and work location. And, like, when you just let the algorithm run, like, that's what it would say. And you're like, okay, well, that actually doesn't make sense because you really don't want hotels near your home and work location for the most part. You want the opposite, right? So some things like that happen. Or, we also saw, like, Marsbot will confirm preferences, and so sometimes it'll be like, Marsbot, would say, you must really like strip clubs. Do you want me to be on the lookout for more strip clubs? That would be a really awkward text message to send somebody. So if you think about, there's a lot of different categories of places, and you should just be mindful about which ones you're picking and which ones are really relevant for you. The second is about inferring preferences. So like I said, we usually will actually check with the users to make sure they want to be recommended these places. So for example, if a user goes to, say, like 3 Italian restaurants, you would assume that they probably like Italian, but a lot of times they don't necessarily. Like maybe they're being dragged there by their partner, or maybe it's just really close, but they aren't in love with it. So usually we'll follow up with them and be like, hey, we think you like Italian. Do you really like Italian? And if they say yes, then we'll actually be on the lookout for recommendations. So we found that when we tried to be too smart and infer too much, users got kind of annoyed and were like, no, I hate Italian. Why would you possibly think that? And it's like, well, because you went to 3 Italian places, it would seem logical. But so we kind of learned that we shouldn't infer too much about what our users are doing. I mentioned that we keep track of historical visits, and that's mainly so you look smart and you don't recommend places the user has already been. The user has like a whole life before you saw them, and so they obviously don't expect you to know all of that, but I think to the extent that you can keep track of what you recommended and where they've already been and try and always be providing new information, that's always good. And then finally, be friendly, be visual, be personal. SMS is a very natural human communication channel, and I think people expect the text to be very friendly. So really think about your copy. I think it's very different than sort of the canned marketing messages that people see and push notifications and emails. So you really have to think about it being more like you're chatting with a friend. And I think people appreciate that personality because it resonates a lot more and it feels different and new and fresh. So that's pretty much all I've got. To get started, you can go to developer.foursquare.com. Jeff, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. Thank you, Marissa, for the example of Marsbot. What we are excited for what you built. That's what we built. We built this tools. We have this underlying infrastructure, and this is an example of what we built. But there's applications throughout the ecosystem, and we're just excited about what you come up with. And that's why we have an open way to get it. And there it is, developer.foursquare.com, and there's your one line that you need. And you're good to go.
Yeah, and we'll be up here for questions if anybody has some. Otherwise, we'll be upstairs, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll be here for a few minutes. Otherwise, you can come see us upstairs at the booth that we're not manning right now. Oops.
Thank you, guys.